Increasingly, science is discovering that some diseases may in fact be woven into our DNA. There are more than 20,000 genes in the human genome. In any two people, 99% are the same. It's the other 1% that affects our risk of disease. Now, in some cases, doctors can determine that risk through genetic testing, whether you have a higher probability of getting some diseases, including cancer.
Gretchen Robertson felt like a ticking time bomb.
Pauline died of brain cancer. Elvira died of colon cancer.
Her father had colon cancer and her grandmother died from it at just 45. So Gretchen got screened at 38. And it's a good thing she did.
I had a 17-millimeter polyp that was cancerous. 38 just seemed just so young. Having the gene, you're more at risk more quickly.
Lynch syndrome is caused by a genetic defect. If you have it, your chances of getting colon cancer go up to almost 80%. Lynch syndrome also causes the cancer to strike earlier, lowering the average age for diagnosis from 65 to 45. But Gretchen thinks this critical information is cost-effective.
If you get a genetic test that shows you're at risk for things, you can prevent the cancer. What more could you ask for? The insurance companies won't get the bills for cancer treatment because the cancer won't develop.
Hi, John.
Last week, John's results came in.
So we've got the results back, and the results show that you do have the gene.
I do. Okay.
And though it's not guaranteed he'll get colon cancer, John now knows his odds have increased significantly.
Genetic testing can tell you your risk, and knowing your risk allows you to take steps that could save your life.
Take some nice deep breaths for me.
The good news is colon cancer is 90% curable if found early. So John should now have a colonoscopy every year. His 3 children will need annual screenings too, starting in their 20s, unless a genetic test proves they're negative. Luckily, Gretchen's colon cancer was treatable, but she's not taking any chances. Yesterday, knowing that Lynch syndrome increases her risk for other kinds of cancer, like endometrial and ovarian, she had a complete hysterectomy.
In some ways, do you feel as if you've opened up Pandora's box? Do you ever say, what next?
Yes, I feel like, oh boy, this is really a lot. There are days it's very hard, but I look at my 3 kids and I think, wouldn't my grandmother have given anything to have had this opportunity to be screened for all these things once a year instead of the alternative. So that kind of keeps me going.
When I was told I had cancer, it's like the whole world comes crushing down on you.
After a double mastectomy and chemotherapy, her doctors say she'll be okay. But what caused the cancer? One cause of breast cancer is a genetic mutation. If Shubin hasn't, there's a 50-50 chance she's passed it on to her daughter.
I want to know to be able to take precautions to make sure that I'm going to be okay.
Her mother says she will get tested, and Molly says she's ready for the results, whatever they are. Genetic testing can now show us our future.
You can handle what's ever dealt to you, but it's better to know what you're dealing with than the unknown.
I hope in my lifetime before that will happen, I'll hopefully have a cure for it.
So many times, cancer patients want to know why it happened to them. Could they have prevented it? In some cases, we don't do anything to cause cancer. It's in our genetics. That's why more and more people are turning to genetic testing.
Breast cancer was the farthest thing from my mind.
Joan has stage 4 breast cancer and is at risk for ovarian cancer too.
It's just 1 tube of blood, so it's
She learned about the ovarian cancer risk after having a genetics test. That test showed she has a genetic mutation that increases her risk of both cancers.
I kept going over my mind what I'd done to cause cancer in myself. And so it's like, okay, now there's a reason why I have this.
There's also a reason Joan and people like her are coming forward with their results. In a lot of cases, knowing your genetic risk for cancer can help prevent it. Unfortunately for Joan, the test came 2 years too late. She'll undergo chemo for the rest of her life, but hopes her story will encourage others to not be afraid of learning their fate.
Had I known about this and this test, I wouldn't be in the situation I'm in now.
Good evening, everyone. We're beginning tonight with a surprising new discovery about smoking. Despite all the health warnings, an estimated 45 million Americans still do it. Every year, about 40% try to quit, but only 5% succeed. And now we have a better idea of why so many people are hooked on cigarettes and dying as a result. As Dr. Emily Sine reports, it's something in our genes.
3 studies all conclude small variations in genes can have a profound impact on the risk of lung cancer for smokers by making cigarettes more deadly, more addictive, or both. Smokers without the genes have about a 1 in 6 chance of developing lung cancer. But in smokers who inherit the gene from both parents, the risk of cancer rises to 1 in 4, an 80% increase.
The co-founder of Google has just gone public with a personal health issue discovered through DNA testing.
He got more than he bargained for. His mother has Parkinson's, and his DNA contains a gene for it as well. This leaves me in a rather unique position, he wrote. I know early in life something I'm substantially predisposed to. I have a better guess than almost anyone else for what ills may be mine, he said, and I have decades to prepare for it.
Well, there's been a lot of cancer in my family. Going way back. There have been a lot of early onset cancers back to my grandparents, my father, my uncle. So I made a decision that I would get the test. And I told them, I said, well, if that's the only way I'm going to help protect my children, then I'll get this test done.
With these mutations that put them at very high risk for disease, don't even know about it. The reason it's important that consumers be aware of this information is that patients identifying their own risks and then having a conversation with the doctor is the way to get them plugged in to the medical system so they receive appropriate interventions. So we're seeing a tremendous uptake in physicians who are incorporating it into their practices because they know this information is important for their patients.
Pharmacogenomics, genetic prophecy, these things are very important for our future. What do we mean by this? When you understand more about what genes actually do, and when you are able to do gene screening of people much more simply and at low cost, then it becomes possible to match people's genetic code with other people whose histories you know about. And that means we're able to say that someone has a greater risk of this or of that, or that there's a 90% probability that someone will die by a certain age of a particular illness. It enables interventions to be made. It also enables us to be able to tell in advance which kinds of treatments will work best in what kinds of people with what kind of condition. And that's especially important with cancer, where we're using drugs which are so toxic that you can easily kill someone before you've cured the cancer. Pharmacogenomics, pharma to do with drugs, genomics to do with genetic code, is such an interesting area for the future.
Using a process called photolithography, Affymetrix encodes genetic information from the human genome onto gene chip probe arrays. The manufacturing process uses light to selectively activate the chip surface, followed by chemical reaction with the DNA building blocks. Repeated cycles of selective activation of the surface in predetermined patterns allow many different DNA probes to be built up in a small number of steps. As the size of features is reduced, the amount of information contained on a single gene chip array increases exponentially. Using the gene chip fluidics station, a test sample is introduced into the DNA probe array where hybridization occurs. Each probe on the chip is a single strand of DNA. Hybridization results when 2 complementary strands of DNA come together to form a complex. When a single-stranded test sample is washed over the surface, the sample will bind to its complementary strand. Since the sequence at each location on the chip is known, researchers can determine the sample DNA sequence and determine if a target gene is present and whether or not it contains mutations.
When we compare the genomes from any 2 people, they are nearly identical. But DNA between any 2 people differs on average of 1 out of 1,000 bases. These variations in the sequence are called single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs.
The most important thing to prevent prostate cancer is to pick your parents properly.
Welcome to the Forbes Video Network. I'm Jennifer Lee. If you could know you carried a breast cancer gene, would you? How about Alzheimer's or heart disease? Forbes' Matt Herper explored this in his latest article. Hi, Matt.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. So this is a real serious question. I know with a family history of cancer, that's always been a question of finding the genetic code.
Right.
But in your article, you mentioned that over the last several years, there's been a lot of advances, and this is becoming even more a real alternative for people, whether they have a history of disease or not, right?
Right. Well, we're starting to actually find genes that are linked to disease. And we're really seeing the first examples now. Now, there was a lot of excitement about this 7 years ago when you first started hearing about the maps in the human genome, but it's really taken this long to develop the technologies where scientists are really starting to find things. And in the past few weeks, we've had kind of an explosion of genes for heart disease, diabetes, breast cancer.
A big business boom for some of these biotechs.
Right.
Who are some of the big names, companies behind supplying this technology?
Well, Affymetrix has been kind of the old standby for DNA chips, which are critical in finding these new genes. Illumina, which is a newer company, has really been doing great in that same market.